Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to a very, very special edition of Finding Me Today on the ITV networks. This interview consists of two parts, and I have to be very honest right at the outset that the guests here today with me are very special to me, and so I'm very biased towards them for the simple reason that I have learnt much from them, and the engagement with them has been phenomenal. It is for this reason that I have invited them to the studios today and have also considered the possibility of doing this interview over two parts. So with that, I would like to go straight to the very warm welcome and to say, you know what, I'm thrilled to have you here because I think it's going to be an exceptional interview. Of course, just considering the red t-shirt and what it stands for already, we'll start raising a lot of questions. But first, let me start with you. First I have with me is Joel Modire. He's a lecturer in legal philosophy at the Faculty of Law, University of Pretoria. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you for having us.
And then it's Alfred Moraka. You're a lecturer in jurisprudence at the Faculty of Law at the University of Pretoria.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alfred, and I love the hairstyle.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do too.
And then with me is Jaco Olofsson. Jaco, you're the secretary of the EFF Student Command at the University of Pretoria. Yes. And you're also finally a political and philosophy student. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the range is quite extensive here, and I think that we're going to have a lot to talk about. But of course, the issues are very, very poignant, and they're quite serious in some way. But the first thing I think we need to set the ground straight is that you are the future of South Africa. You're the young academics that are coming together, meeting at informal coffee shops, through book clubs and readings, and you're trying to engage with the literature and, of course, with each other's minds to bring forth those discourses that are not often or easily accessible, especially in the way in which education and knowledge is controlled. So let's start at the starting point. And I think, Joel, I'd like to start with you because, I mean, you educated me phenomenally and the whole discussion on transformation. What does it mean to you, and how do we understand transformation in the context that we are in?
In the university context?
Yes.
In the discussion I've had, I've been thinking about different ways in which people talk about transformation. The one understanding of transformation I've always found problematic is transformation is simply cosmetic. It's about changing names, it's about giving buildings African names, black names, and so forth. I've also had a problem with the notion of transformation as simply the changing of interpersonal relations. For me, transformation in a university context will involve, in the first place, changing the racial and gender demographic of both the students and the staff. And that means new voices also come through. That idea of transformation in the university has been strong, and it's ongoing. It's linked to questions around affirmative action, it's linked to questions around student admissions. That's an ongoing debate. The one notion of transformation that's becoming quite strong nowadays is curriculum transformation. So it's, you have the black students there, you have the black teachers there, but what are they being taught and who's teaching them? And that's, for me, the transformation that's important, and that's where we need to decolonize the curriculum. That's the one I think that's been missed in the debate. So we're so focused on representativity and redistribution. It's about jobs, right? Giving black people jobs or university positions, that we're not thinking about the cultural and epistemological knowledge order in a university. Whose knowledge counts, whose knowledge matters. At this point, unfortunately, in all South African universities, including the so-called historically black universities, but mostly in the historical white university, there's this problem of a so-called northbound gaze. Everything from experience to knowledge to understandings of the world to the kinds of information and material that is deemed to be relevant is produced largely through an Anglo-European, American, German, French tradition. What's problematic about that is simply about the centrality of the culture. Which culture is central? In France, French culture is central. The curriculum is French. The rest of the cultures are extra. They're additions. There are other civilizations you learn about. In South Africa, where blacks are a majority, Africans are a majority, you have the complete inverse. Western perspective is dominant. An American perspective, American theory, including critical theory. I mean, German constitutionalism, for example, in a law faculty, French political philosophy, very dominant, central to the curriculum. African perspectives come at the end. That's problematic.
So, Alfred, both you and Jaco have been nodding your heads. But considering then from a jurisprudence point of view, how would you then consider transformation? And can you add something to what Joel has said?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I agree. And I think university intakes are very low in our country. And I think that we have to have a say in the kind of education that we are being given. For me, the concern, we are people who are concerned with justice, who are concerned with equality, who are concerned with the historical legacy of racism in this country, and so too of gender supremacy. And so the transformation for me will always entail also a broad way of understanding the connected nature of all of those things and the way in which they can manifest in the university, and to eradicate them, to fight against them. That's really what it would entail. We're from jurisprudence, so jurisprudence is the study of law that is political.
Yes.
So that would mean that we have to see the way in which law itself has largely, at least for the apartheid government, functioned as a structure that legitimized and actually operated apartheid through law, through legislation, through giving judges power to be able to give down racist judgment. And so for jurisprudence, it's really about deconstructing the law, understanding the ways in which it continues to reproduce these kind of ideas about racism, about sexism, and so on. So for us, jurisprudence would mean really transforming not only the curriculum, but more specifically to our context, transforming law and the constitution.
But considering that we're speaking about law now, there is a whole notion of post-apartheid jurisprudence also. What should that entail? Are we there yet, or are we still struggling to get there?
We're still struggling to get that. We are contesting the idea that there is even a post. And so post-apartheid South Africa doesn't assume that apartheid is over. It's a philosophy, or at least an area of thought in scholarship that tries to contest the notion that we are now living in a rainbow nation, that apartheid is no longer relevant. But it's also a philosophy that tries to show the sophisticated way in which apartheid has actually reinstigated itself within a private sector now. So we may not have explicit apartheid in the form of laws and so on that are racist and so on, but certainly in the economic arrangement of our country, in the social political ideas about blacks, in the power, racial power and privilege of white people, we still live under an apartheid organization, an apartheid kind of country.
I'm going to come to that. There's a lot that we need to talk about coming from there. But Jaco, very quickly, from your perspective then, and especially from the perspective of the EFF, I mean, without a doubt, when the EFF came onto the scene, there was, I mean, even when I speak to my students initially, first year, second year, say, oh, EFF, no, never, that man is a madman, Julius is a madman, you know. So how even, I suppose, the way in which the EFF is going to be viewed is also a process of transformation too. So a political transformation, understanding the different manifestos that are up for grabs, or basically what you're proposing. So in your understanding, from a political party, a student campaign political party, and of course generally just as a white person in a very black South Africa, how do you understand this whole concept of transformation?
Well, what Joel mentioned earlier is kind of exactly the summarization of how the EFF themselves want to achieve change at our universities. The main focus definitely at the moment is the curriculum transformation. Obviously the EFF speaks of issues on that their ultimate goal when it comes to tertiary education is to make it free and good quality for everybody, which is a noble goal, which already alone, to me, if you speak about people saying that the EFF wants to give people free quality education, they immediately get aggressive about it. They take a defensive stance against it and say that it's stupid. How are we going to pay for this?
Yes.
That is not the question. But to me, with regard to the curriculum change, is exactly what Joel mentioned with regards to when you go to Europe. Now, as a philosophy student, and I'm studying philosophy and I'm in my final year now, I haven't encountered any African philosophers, and I'm at my final year. So to me, it is a deep concern to me, because before we talk about the transformation of the university's curriculum, we first have to breach this epistemic racism that is a barrier, almost like a hub around the curriculum. And this hub, with regard to African knowledge, is that they don't consider it to be a valid source of knowledge. They don't even consider it to be knowledgeable. And that's the type of racism that we're going to have to attack. And we're going to have to start addressing it. The sheer fact that they still believe that knowledge and education was non-existent before Europeans arrived in Africa is absolutely bizarre and silly. To me, it's just simply you don't know your historical facts.
And so the EFF Student Command is trying to raise these particular issues.
Our main goal for this year at least is to start driving this radical ideal that the university must start addressing the issues of how we are going to make this curriculum change. Now, for us to drive the fight for free quality education is not our fight to fight on campus. That is our comrade and Malema's job in Parliament. But here at the university, at least we will continue to encourage students to start questioning things. The apathy of politics is tiring. It's getting old, it's stale now, and students are starting to get tired of it. They're asking questions around these things. Why aren't we not receiving education from our continent? Why are we not reading African philosophers, African politicians, African economists? There are many of them. So to me, I always find it to be interesting when we're in these meetings with different departments saying that we cannot just simply do these things because where do we get the people to do it? But to me, the question is there are people. It's just you don't have the will to find them.
Okay, and we're not training them.
And we're not training them.
And I think it's also about the university environment. The university is an intellectual hub. And I think at the center of EFF politics and certainly other movements on campus, such as the Traces Forum, there's a focus on conscientization, on making young people understand the way in which they hold obligations to building a new South Africa. And that entails that they understand at least the nature of the world that we live in South Africa today in complex and nuanced ways, to understand the way in which history, in which power plays a role in constructing our reality. So it's really about invigorating students to take politics seriously. So politics is not just about going to parliament, it's not just party politics, it's about a concern with justice, it's about a concern with equality and understanding our responsibility to ourselves, to each other, and to as citizens in this country.
Yeah, we have to go to a break, but I just wanted to think about this particular question. And that you think students must get conscientized and they must actively participate. But if there isn't that education around the issues that need to be addressed, and if they feel that they're in a monolithic culture, as many students feel at the University of Pretoria, how then do you get the students to come out? But think about that. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the second part of Finding Me in the ITV networks. Today with me, the very young and dynamic Joel Modiri, the legal philosophy lecturer at the University of Pretoria, Alfred Moroka, who's the lecturer in jurisprudence at the University of Pretoria, and Jaco Olofse, and I'm going to introduce you as the secretary of the EFF Tuck Student Command. So for the previous discussion that we spoke about, and once again, thank you very much for extending this invitation for me. We spoke about transformation, the whole idea of transformation, and I think part of the transformation was very much what we ended off with in terms of transformation even of the parliament, where the EFF, as Joel said, EFF brought a democratic element to the parliament. And Jaco, you were adding something about this whole notion of transforming the parliament into a more participatory process.
Yeah, for me, what the EFF is doing in parliament is it is opening it up to the public. Firstly, by rejecting Western garb, if you want to call it that, to not wear these formal suits, but dressing how the majority of South Africans are looking, working class people, they need to be represented in parliament. So that already is the first act of resistance, if you can even say a small act of deconstructing parliament.
Can I ask, is it also a way of reminding those who are there that you are here to serve?
Hence
you're supposed to be serving the people.
Received so hostile, because I honestly don't think, especially the comrades from the ANC, don't like it that they're being reminded by an upstart little party like the EFF that they are actually now representing working class interests. And it is a shock for the ANC to deal with this fact that they are not anymore the face of the working class, that nobody considers the ANC to be the face of the working class any longer. So yes, this is why the EFF is being received with such hostility in there. But I think they must continue doing what they're doing, because what they're doing is in service of democracy. And that is important. People don't understand it. They actually are trying to demonize their actions by saying that it's undemocratic, by trying to hush the Madam Speaker and our President Jacob Zuma. But the thing is, on the contrary, it's such a silly way of arguing that they are actually trying to revert democracy. It's just interesting to me.
Alfred, you had a take on that as well?
Yeah, I just thought what they were saying really, for me, inspired this thought of democratizing spaces. Well, Joe spoke the last time about what could be read as a democratizing moment when the EFF are demanding accountability in Parliament.
Yes.
And I was saying, at least for those of us who are in the university context, we might stretch that even further to also include the university as a space that needs to be contested, that needs to be more democratized, that also needs to be open to the public, that needs to understand itself as a public institution, that is also has certain obligation not only to transform within it, but to also inform general intellectual public dialogue. And the university needs to understand that. So
but why are you saying that? While you're speaking about this democratization and the opening up of the university and making it a public participatory place, Joel, I want your opinion about President Jacob Zuma's comment, that has been picked up by the DA, and they've criticized him, and they've criticized Braden Zimande when they both said that we need a transformation of the university, of the curricula, etc. And I mean, if you look at it, the way it was then explained by the DA representative, was it Brenda Bozzoli, and her whole complaint about this notion of academic freedom as opposed to what President Zuma has said. I mean, how do you then understand this? Because when I read it, it said to me, okay, he was another neo-colonial liberal who was now trying to protect everything that the past and apartheid had protected, and was now, I was deconstructing it like that. How do you then understand it?
Yeah, I mean, I read it quite similarly as quite a radical moment. The debate turned on two concepts in university lingo, institutional autonomy and academic freedom.
Yes.
Braden Zimande said there's nothing inherently radical or good about institutional autonomy. And what he was saying was that universities can rely on institutional autonomy to act irresponsibly and to not be held to account for transformation and for certain inequalities that are being perpetuated in and through the university. So university, when you ask a university, why is your curriculum not transformed? They can say institutional autonomy.
Yes, exactly.
So that was the first thing. He was being quite radical about institutional autonomy, that with autonomy, there's a certain responsibility, a public responsibility. Because universities are public institutions.
Yes, definitely.
Then President Zuma made the claim that academic freedom should also include, in addition to freedom of expression, the right of academics to simply produce, should also include freedom from what he called the ideological stranglehold of any one class. But that's an obvious radical insight about how power and knowledge are connected. And his assumption was that, or his claim was that part of being free, academically free, includes freeing up and opening up new epistemologies. And so he was making the claim that's now known in decoloniality as there's no social justice without cognitive justice. There's no liberation without epistemological liberation. So for Professor Bozzoli, who I used to know as someone involved in Marxism and feminism, to not have picked up that claim and to call it bizarre was quite weird. But that's linked to how the ANC is also represented as just encroaching freedom, encroaching on constitutional right, so that nothing critical can come out of there. So I'm completely in agreement with Dr. Zimande and President Zuma on both the notion of institutional autonomy and academic freedom. It's about democratizing them, and it's about saying that universities cannot hide behind autonomy or academic freedom to not take responsibility for
Okay, but now there's two points that I want to bring, and then you guys can just jump in at any point when you want to add. The first thing is, how do you respond then to the liberal academic who has said that President Zuma is now trying to mainstream, or to streamline Africans or academics into supporting one particular ideology or viewpoint, precisely because of his viewpoint where he said that the university should create more patriotic citizens. So that's the first part. And the second part is, as you were speaking about this, where the university is hiding now behind institutional autonomy, it raised the whole discussion that I had with Professor Ramose, where he said the constitution is now should be contested because universities hide behind the constitutional privilege of private property, etc. So that's why the constitution was established in the first place. Instead of a parliamentary democracy, we went to constitutional democracy to really entrench and to protect the rights of those who have always enjoyed privilege. So there are two parts to this particular thing. But Joel, if you can address.
Briefly on both. The first one is universities historically, by definition, always had ideological functions. In South Africa, historically white universities were part of the colonial project of keeping white people aware of what's happening in Europe, in their homeland, so they don't degenerate into the dark continent. And then it was that blacks can come into the university space so they can learn how to be civilized. So universities have always had an ideology. If they're claiming that President Zuma's intentions are linked to imposing a hegemonic ideology, then all of us are quite happy to contest that. But the idea of a university that is non-ideological is not true. As regards this notion of a patriotic citizen, all of us now are concerned, as we complain now about students who drink and have sex and don't care really about the world and just about themselves, is we want students who are active citizens.
We want them to be patriotic.
I think we want them to be patriotic, and patriotic means responsible for your country, for its problems, taking ownership in its issues, and being politically alive and aware. And if that's what patriotic means in Jacob Zuma's sense, I'm quite happy to have patriotic citizens.
Absolutely. And I think it has to do with the idea that people understand patriotism in the same way that the United States does, or the West does. So they think we're thinking about putting flags outside, supporting the ANC, when for us being patriotic means being concerned, being attuned with the kind of country that you are living in, and being concerned about justice, about inequality, developing a sense of critical thinking and critical awareness about the stuff that are happening on in our country. So if we perhaps there was a moment that we could, instead of already borrow from a racist assumption that he's trying to do this and already are taken with a suspicious thing, perhaps the question was to ask, well, what do you mean about patriotism? How do we clarify what is patriotism? Understand? So perhaps these moments allow us to really step back, that instead of relying on automatic triggers that are often racistly motivated, there is a time to think deeply, to reflect, and to understand what somebody was claiming, and to contest it, and perhaps even alter it to be aligned with our concern. And I definitely think if Jacob Zuma was pushed to understand what patriotism is, it would definitely be different to the Western understanding of patriotism.
And it's supposed to
as uncritical support of the state.
And I think the EFF's behavior, especially in Parliament, and what they did further at the Gauteng legislature, etc., is also an indication of patriotism, that we care about our society, we care about what's happened, we care about the negotiated and the compromise settlement at Quraysha, we care about the issues that are not being addressed, isn't it?
And even if you look at this whole notion of, say, black nationalism, anything that, if it is patriotic to stand up for the person who you are, for me at least, black identity was so tarnished and destroyed and demonized since colonialism that when the black nationalist agendas rose in Africa against the colonial oppressors, it was interesting. You cannot compare black nationalism with, say, white nationalism. The two are totally two different things. So to me, if it means that one needs to be proud of your country and where you're part of it, and the contributions we make to South Africa, and accountability and responsibility, then I would say all three of us are patriots.
So while you're speaking about black nationalism and this difference, and of course of the black person rising, it comes again to that whole discussion about the subaltern voice. I mean, it's always trying to present this viewpoint that the subaltern or the black person does not have a voice, does not have an intellect, does not have anything to put forward. How is that how you then see it also in the continuous hegemonic discussions? And that's why also the infantilizing of the EFF, etc.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. It was Gyatri Spivak who did the subaltern voice. And Grada Kilomba in her book Plantation Memories were actually quite in-depth explained to her why it is such a problem, because the problem needs to be identified. If we bring it back to universities, at least, it lies with the education, the curriculum that we need to decolonize.
So thank you very much, Joel, Alfred, and Yaku. Fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.